8 guys, 8 completely different personalities. One question that's been living rent-free in the minds of millions of fans across the globe. What kind of woman actually fits each Stray Kids member? Now, before we dive, this isn't a gossip piece and it's not a rumor report. Everything here is grounded in what the members themselves have shared publicly over the years. Interviews, reality shows, V-Lives, and candid moments that reveal more about who they are than any scripted performance ever could. This is a personality-based breakdown, built on observation, not speculation dressed up as fact. Stray Kids didn't become one of the biggest fourth-generation groups in K-pop by being generic. Each member carries a genuinely distinct energy, and that energy naturally points towards a specific kind of person they'd connect with on a real, lasting level. Some of these matches will feel obvious the moment you hear them. Others might genuinely surprise you. And number 1? Let's just say it's the kind of answer that hits different once you understand the full picture. We're starting with number 8, and trust us, it sets the tone for everything that follows. Number 8, Bang Chan, an understanding woman. There's a specific kind of pressure that comes with being the leader of one of the most globally recognized K-pop groups in the world, and Bang Chan carries it every single day without making it look like a burden. Born Christopher Bang on October 3, 1997 in Sydney, Australia, Chan trained under JYP Entertainment for 7 years before Stray Kids even debuted in 2018. 7 years is not a short time. That's the kind of commitment that reshapes a person's entire relationship with discipline, patience, and delayed gratification. By the time the group made their official debut, Chan wasn't just a member, he was already functioning as the emotional and creative backbone of the team. His role within Stray Kids is genuinely multidimensional. As the leader, he manages group dynamics, mediates tension, and keeps the team grounded during high-pressure moments. As a producer within the Unit 3 Racha alongside Han and Changbin, he writes, composes, and produces a significant portion of Stray Kids' discography. And beyond all of that, he still performs at the level expected of a main performer in a top-tier act. The workload alone would overwhelm most people. Chan absorbs it. What makes this relevant to the question of compatibility isn't just that he's busy, it's how he's busy. Chan doesn't compartmentalize easily. He carries his responsibilities with him emotionally. Fans who have followed his late-night Chan's Room broadcasts on V-Live, a series he ran for years where he'd sit alone in the studio late at night and talk openly with fans, have seen this firsthand. He spoke about exhaustion, about missing home, about the weight of feeling responsible for others. These weren't scripted confessions. They were real-time vulnerability from someone who doesn't switch off when the cameras stop rolling. That emotional texture is exactly why the type of woman considered most compatible with Bang Chan isn't simply someone who's supportive in a surface-level way. It goes deeper than that. What Chan's personality profile points towards is someone with genuine emotional maturity, a woman who understands that love isn't always about presence and that a partner's absence isn't the same as indifference. In the K-pop industry, schedules are relentless. Tours, recordings, promotions, and public appearances stack on top of each other in ways that make traditional relationship rhythms nearly impossible to maintain. A person who requires constant availability, frequent reassurance, or who interprets busyness as emotional distance would find that dynamic exhausting, and so would Chan. The friction alone would compound the stress he already manages professionally. What works for someone like Chan is a partner who is self-sufficient, not cold, self-sufficient. Someone who has her own ambitions, her own projects, her own inner world that doesn't collapse in his absence. A woman who can hold down her own life confidently while also being a steady presence when he does come home. That combination, independence paired with warmth, is a rare thing, but it's precisely what his personality calls for. There's also the matter of emotional intelligence. Chan has demonstrated repeatedly and publicly that he processes his feelings through conversation and reflection. He doesn't bottle things up quietly. He reaches out, he talks, he works through things verbally. A partner who responds to that with patience rather than judgment, who can hold space for his emotional processing without turning it into an argument or a competition of feelings, would be someone he could genuinely lean on. And for a person who spends so much of his energy taking care of others, having a safe space to simply be without performing strength is not a luxury, it's a necessity. Chan has also never hidden his deep attachment to his roots. He speaks openly about missing Australia, about his family, about the cultural identity he carries as a Korean Australian who grew up thousands of miles away from where he now works. A woman who respects that, who doesn't dismiss it as nostalgia but understand it as a core part of who he is, would naturally fit more comfortably into his life. Someone who can engage with that part of him authentically, whether through curiosity, genuine interest, or shared experience, would create a connection that feels real rather than performative. Patience is the other non-negotiable, not passive patience, active patience, the kind that knows when to push gently and when to simply let things breathe. Chan runs on a schedule that he doesn't fully control, in an industry that doesn't always offer predictability. A partner who can adapt to that without resentment, who understands that canceled plans or exhausted silences aren't rejections, would be someone he could build something lasting with. It's worth noting that Chan himself has given small but telling glimpses into what he values in relationships. In various interviews and fan interactions over the years, he's emphasized sincerity above all else. He values people who mean what they say. He notices when someone is being genuine versus when they're performing a version of themselves for an audience. Given that he lives in an industry saturated with performance, it makes complete sense that authenticity would be the quality he gravitates towards most. Put it all together and the picture becomes clear. The woman most naturally suited to Bang Chan isn't defined by any single dramatic quality. She doesn't need to be extraordinary in a loud way. She needs to be real, emotionally grounded, independently capable, patient without being passive, and genuine without being naive. Someone who can be his quiet anchor without making him feel like he owes her calm in return. For a man who gives so much of himself to everyone around him, that kind of partnership isn't just compatible, it's what makes the giving sustainable. And now that we've set the bar with the leader, the next member on the list brings a completely different energy, someone whose personality requires a woman who can hold her own in ways that go beyond just emotional steadiness. Number 7. Lee No, a woman with a strong character. If Bang Chan is the anchor of Stray Kids, Lee No is the current running just beneath the surface. Unpredictable, precise, and impossible to look away from once you've noticed him. Born Lee Min-ho on October 25, 1998 in Gimpo, South Korea, Lee No has one of the more fascinating origin stories within the group. Before becoming a Stray Kids member, he was famously eliminated from the survival show that formed the group, then brought back after JYP Entertainment recognized something in him that the format of a competition show couldn't fully capture. That decision turned out to be one of the better calls the label made. Lee No went on to become one of the most technically precise dancers in the fourth-generation K-pop landscape, widely recognized by choreographers and fellow performers as someone whose movement quality operates on a different level entirely. But dancing ability alone doesn't explain why Lee No has carved out such a distinct identity within the group. What separates him is the specific combination of qualities he walks around with every single day. And those qualities tell you a great deal about who he'd actually work with in a relationship. Lee No is, by all observable accounts, someone who does not perform warmth for the sake of social comfort. He's not cold, but he's also not the type to soften his personality to make others more comfortable around him. He says what he thinks. He deadpans when others are being dramatic. He maintains a level of composure in group settings that can read as detachment to people who don't know him well, but reads as confidence to those who do. The distinction matters. In numerous fan interactions, variety show appearances, and group content over the years, Lee Know has consistently demonstrated a dry, layered sense of humor that doesn't translate well on paper but lands precisely in context. He'll deliver a genuinely funny observation with a completely straight face, then move on before the room has finished reacting. It's a specific kind of wit, the kind that requires an audience capable of keeping up, because if you miss the timing, the joke is already gone. This is where compatibility becomes a very particular conversation. Lee Know's personality type doesn't naturally pair with someone who needs constant warmth externally signaled to feel secure. A woman who reads his composure as disinterest or who interprets his directness as dismissiveness would find the dynamic exhausting and confusing in equal measure. Not because Lee Know is difficult, but because the way he expresses himself requires a specific kind of reading that not everyone has the patience or confidence to develop. The woman whose character fits most naturally alongside his is someone who is secure in herself before she ever enters the room, not performatively confident, genuinely grounded, someone who doesn't need validation delivered in obvious, conventional packaging, because she's already established a clear sense of who she is and what she wants. That internal solidity is what allows her to be present with Lee Know without needing to constantly decode him or second-guess what he means. There's also the matter of independence. Lee Know is a person with a rich inner life that he manages largely on his own terms. He is famously devoted to his 3 cats, Suni, Doongi, and Dory, in a way that reveals something genuine about his relationship with quiet companionship and non-performative affection. He doesn't need to be the loudest person in the space. He's entirely comfortable operating at his own frequency. A partner who can respect that frequency, who has her own frequency running alongside his rather than trying to merge entirely into his, is someone he could actually sustain a connection with over time. What's particularly interesting about Lee Know is how his humor functions as a compatibility filter almost on its own. His comedic sensibility is specific and dry in a way that not everyone clicks with immediately. But when someone does click with it, when someone can volley back without missing the beat, without over-explaining the joke, without forcing laughter where none is needed, the connection becomes something genuinely electric. He's on record across multiple group content pieces as being most animated and engaged when he's in genuine back and forth rather than one-sided performance. A woman who can match his rhythm conversationally, who has her own sharp wit without trying to outperform his, would create the kind of dynamic where both people are actually enjoying each other's company rather than just occupying the same space. His strong character also means he's drawn to someone with clear convictions. Lee Know doesn't seem to respond particularly well to ambivalence, to people who say whatever you want when asked for an opinion, or who shape their personality around whoever they're with at the time. He's someone who knows his own preferences, holds them comfortably, and functions best alongside someone who does the same. A woman with genuine opinions, distinct tastes, and the confidence to stand behind them without needing external reinforcement is far more interesting to someone like Lee Know than one who simply agrees. There's also something worth noting about his relationship with consistency. Despite his surface-level unpredictability, Lee Know is remarkably consistent in the things that actually matter to him: his craft, his relationships with the members he's built over years of proximity, and the handful of things he clearly genuinely cares about. A partner who understands the difference between his surface-level unpredictability and his deeper consistency would see him far more accurately than someone who takes the surface at face value. That accuracy, that ability to actually see someone rather than just observe them, is something that builds the kind of trust Lee Know would actually invest in. The picture that emerges is a woman who is independent, confident without being loud about it, quick enough to match his wit, and grounded enough to not misread his composure as indifference. Someone who brings her own strong character into the relationship rather than waiting to see what shape she should take. For someone who doesn't give himself away easily, that kind of partner would be the one who earns the version of Lee Know that most people never actually get to see. And if you think that's a specific set of qualities to look for, wait until you hear what the next member needs, because his compatibility profile runs entirely on a different kind of current. Number 6. Hyunjin, a creative partner. Some people experience the world and move on. Hyunjin experiences the world and turns it into something. Born Wang Hyunjin on March 20, 2000, in Seoul, South Korea, Hyunjin has built a public identity that sits at an unusual intersection, one that doesn't come along often in the K-pop industry or anywhere else. He's a main dancer and vocalist within Stray Kids, yes, but that's almost the smallest part of the conversation. Outside of his group activities, Hyunjin has established himself as a genuine visual artist. He paints, he draws, he has held exhibitions. His work has been displayed publicly and received with serious attention, not as a celebrity novelty, but as art that stands on its own terms. That distinction is worth sitting with for a moment, because it shapes everything else about who he is. Hyunjin has spoken across multiple interviews about how creativity functions for him, not as a hobby, not as a side project, but as the primary language through which he processes life. When he experiences something emotionally significant, his instinct is to translate it into movement, into image, into performance. He's the kind of person who looks at an ordinary object and genuinely asks what story it's carrying. That's not an affectation. The body of work he's produced over the years as a visual artist makes clear that this is simply how his mind operates. He was also a contemporary dance trainee before joining JYP Entertainment, which adds another layer. Contemporary dance, unlike more rigid, structured forms, demands that the performer bring personal, emotional truth into the movement. There's no hiding in contemporary dance. The form requires a level of emotional honesty that most people never have to access publicly. Hyunjin has been doing that since before he was a teenager. The combination of visual art, contemporary dance, and performance means that Hyunjin moves through the world with a heightened sensitivity to aesthetics, emotion, and meaning. He notices things other people walk past. He attaches significance to things that most people process and discard. That's an extraordinary quality in a creative context, and it also comes with a very specific set of relationship needs. The woman whose presence fits most naturally alongside Hyunjin's is someone who lives inside creativity the way he does. Not necessarily someone who paints or dances, though that would certainly create an immediate shared language, but someone for whom art, in any form, is a genuine mode of engagement with the world, rather than simply a form of entertainment. A woman who visits a gallery and has an actual response to what she sees, who listens to music and thinks about why it was constructed the way it was, who understands that a film or a photograph or a piece of writing can carry weight that justifies extended conversation. Hyunjin has been candid about the fact that he is emotionally expressive and that he places real value in emotional honesty in his relationships. In a 2021 fan interaction, he described wanting a partner who is genuine, someone who doesn't hide what they feel or what they think. For someone whose entire creative life is built on the premise that emotion is worth expressing, a partner who suppresses or dismisses emotional communication would create a fundamental disconnection. He needs someone who can go there with him, not just in comfortable moments, but in the ones that require actual vulnerability. His sensitivity is also something that requires careful navigation. Hyunjin has openly discussed the fact that he internalizes external opinions deeply: criticism, perception, judgment. He has spoken honestly about difficult periods where public opinion affected him in real and painful ways. This isn't weakness, it's the natural consequence of being someone whose emotional antennae are calibrated at a higher frequency than average. A partner who understands that, who can offer grounding without dismissiveness, who can say, "That matters and you're still okay," without making him feel fragile for having felt it, is someone who adds genuine stability to his life, rather than adding noise to it. There's a romantic dimension that runs through nearly everything Hyunjin expresses publicly. He approaches beauty, visual beauty, emotional beauty, the beauty in a well-executed moment, with genuine reverence. He's the type of person who finds meaning in small, carefully chosen gestures, a handwritten note, a specific song chosen for a specific moment, the right light in the right place at the right time. A partner who is alive to that way of experiencing the world, who can recognize and appreciate a gesture for the thought that went into it, rather than its scale, would connect with him on a level that goes beyond surface attraction. His creative process is also something that requires a partner with patience and genuine curiosity. Hyunjin doesn't produce quickly, he produces thoughtfully. His visual artwork, his choreography contributions, his approach to performance all reflect someone who sits with an idea until it becomes what it was meant to be, rather than what was convenient. A partner who respects that process, who doesn't rush it or misread deep focus as emotional distance, is someone who allows him to be his most productive and most authentic self simultaneously. What also matters is the ability to challenge him intellectually and creatively. Hyunjin is not someone who thrives in the absence of stimulation. He needs exchange, genuine creative exchange with a partner who brings her own perspective, her own aesthetic sensibility, her own way of seeing things, not mirroring his taste back at him, but offering something genuinely different that expands the conversation. The kind of creative tension that produces growth rather than conflict. The profile that emerges is a woman who is emotionally open, creatively engaged, aesthetically alive, and patient with the depth that someone like Hyunjin naturally brings. Someone who sees his sensitivity as a strength rather than a complication, and who can meet his genuine romantic nature with something equally real. For someone who has spent his entire career translating feeling into form, the right partner is the one who makes him feel like he finally doesn't have to translate at all. That's a high bar, but the next member on our list sets a completely different kind of bar, built not on depth and sensitivity, but on something far more immediately warm. Number 5. Felix, a warm-hearted woman. There are people who make a room feel warmer simply by walking into it. Felix is one of those people, and what makes that genuinely interesting is that it's not a performance. Born Lee Yong-bok on September 15, 2000 in Sydney, Australia, Felix grew up in a Korean household in a country where Korean culture was not the dominant experience around him. He moved to South Korea alone as a teenager to pursue his trainee path under JYP Entertainment, a decision that required a level of courage that tends to get underestimated when we talk about K-pop trainees. Leaving home at that age, in a country where he was still developing his fluency in the primary language, surrounded by people who had cultural context he was still building, that shapes a person in specific and lasting ways. What it shaped in Felix is particularly visible. He is, across every piece of observable public content, someone who leads with warmth as a default position. Not manufactured warmth, not the practiced fan service variety that saturates the industry, but the kind that comes from someone who has genuinely experienced what it feels like to be far from home and has decided, consciously or not, to never make anyone else feel that way in his presence. His energy in group settings is consistent. He is the member most frequently seen physically affirming the people around him, a hand on a shoulder, a spontaneous hug, a laugh that he throws his whole body into. These aren't camera moments. They happen in the background of other people's content. They happen in candid footage. The consistency across contexts is what confirms that this is simply who Felix is, rather than a character he steps into when the recording light is on. He has spoken openly across multiple interviews and fan interactions about his values in relationships and connection. Felix places enormous weight on sincerity. He notices inauthenticity quickly and responds to genuine warmth with equal or greater warmth in return. He is someone who remembers the details, who pays attention to what people say they like, what makes them laugh, what they're struggling with, and then acts on that memory in ways that make people feel genuinely seen. That relational attentiveness is central to understanding who he's compatible with. Felix doesn't need a partner who performs affection dramatically. He needs one who means it. There is a meaningful difference between those two things, and for someone as emotionally perceptive as Felix, that difference is immediately apparent. The woman most naturally suited to Felix's personality is one whose warmth is structural, built into how she moves through the world rather than switched on for specific occasions. A woman who is genuinely kind to people regardless of whether there's anything to gain from it. Who finds real joy in other people's happiness, rather than treating it as an inconvenience or a competition. Who brings lightness into ordinary moments without needing those moments to be spectacular. Felix's has an infectious quality to his positivity that is both his most immediately recognizable trait and something that requires a specific kind of partner to sustain. His energy is high, genuinely, authentically high, and it needs someone who can receive that energy without being exhausted by it and without dampening it. A woman who is comfortable with expressive happiness, who doesn't read enthusiasm as immaturity or loudness as chaos, would be someone Felix can be fully himself around without editing his natural frequency down. At the same time, warmth without depth is just pleasantness, and Felix is more than pleasant. He is a person who thinks carefully about the people he loves and who invests in relationships with a level of intentionality that goes well beyond surface affection. His Chan's room appearances as a guest, his interactions in group content where he checks in on quieter members, his publicly stated values around family, all of it points to someone who takes the people in his life seriously. A partner who matches that investment, who thinks about the relationship and the other person with the same kind of genuine care, would create the kind of reciprocal dynamic that Felix's personality is built to thrive in. His Australian upbringing is also a relevant thread. Felix has spoken warmly about his family, about the cultural blend of his upbringing, and about the identity questions that come with being a Korean Australian navigating a Korean entertainment industry. He is someone with a genuinely multicultural inner life, and a partner who is curious about that, who is interested in the full, layered picture of who he is, rather than just the version of him that exists on stage, would connect with him on a level that casual admirers simply can't. There is also something worth noting about how Felix handles vulnerability. Despite his bright exterior, he has had honest moments in public, discussing the challenge of adjusting to Korea, the pressure of being a performer, the moments where confidence has wavered. He doesn't collapse in those moments, but he doesn't pretend they don't exist either. A woman who can hold that, who can be a source of genuine comfort when the brightness dips, without treating those moments as alarming or burdensome, is someone who gives Felix a safe landing place. And for someone who gives so freely of his own emotional warmth, having a place to land matters enormously. The profile is clear, a woman whose heart is genuinely open, whose kindness is habitual rather than strategic, whose positivity is real rather than curated, and who can both receive and return the level of sincere affection that Felix brings to every relationship he invests in. For a person who made a home out of warmth in a foreign country at 16, finding a partner who carries that same warmth is not just compatibility, it's recognition. And now we move to a member whose compatibility profile is constructed on almost entirely different foundations, someone whose energy runs hotter, harder, and considerably more intense.
Number 4, Changbin. A firm woman. There is a specific kind of person who walks into a room and immediately raises the energy level of everyone in it, not because they're trying to, but because that's simply what their presence does. Changbin is that person. And understanding what that actually means beyond the surface is where the compatibility conversation gets genuinely interesting. Born Seo Changbin on August 11, 1999, in Anyang, South Korea, Changbin occupies one of the most distinctive positions in Stray Kids' identity. As a member of the producing Unit 3 Racha alongside Bang Chan and Han, he is one of the primary architects of the group's sound, specifically the harder, more aggressive sonic territory that has become a Stray Kids' signature. His rap delivery is built on a technical foundation that has been recognized widely within the industry: rapid-fire syllable placement, breath control, and tonal precision that makes complex verses sound controlled rather than chaotic. Off stage and outside the studio, the version of Changbin that comes through in group content is equally high energy but differently directed. He is playful, loud in the best possible sense, physically expressive, and deeply competitive, not in a way that produces tension, but in a way that produces momentum. He is the type of person who commits fully to whatever he is currently doing, whether that's a physical challenge on a variety show, a game with the members, or a conversation he's decided to engage with. Half measures are not a natural Changbin mode. His dedication to physical fitness is another well-documented dimension of who he is. Changbin has spoken openly about his workout routines and his discipline around physical conditioning, and the consistency he maintains in that area reflects something broader about his character. He is someone who sets a standard for himself and then meets it, repeatedly, without making a performance out of the effort. That kind of disciplined follow-through in one area of life rarely stays contained to just that area. It tends to show up across the board. Now here is where the compatibility picture becomes specific. Changbin's energy, the confidence, the intensity, the physical and verbal boldness, is an asset in virtually every context he operates in. But that same quality means he functions best alongside a woman who can hold her own against it rather than being absorbed by it. A firm woman, in this context, doesn't mean someone harsh or combative. It means someone with a clear sense of self that doesn't dissolve under pressure. Someone who has formed her own opinions and isn't quickly moved off them by a confident voice in the room. Changbin's personality is strong enough that a partner without that internal steadiness would find herself perpetually deferring, and over time, that imbalance would hollow out the relationship from the inside. He needs someone who pushes back when she disagrees, who holds her position without turning it into a standoff, and who can engage with his energy directly rather than sidestepping it. This firmness also matters in a practical sense. Changbin operates in an industry where schedules are demanding, where the physical and mental toll of production cycles is real, and where the pressure to perform at a consistently high level doesn't go away between releases. His response to that pressure is to push harder, to train more, produce more, refine more. That's a sustainable strategy up to a point, and a partner who understands where that point is, who can recognize when pushing harder is the right call and when it's running into diminishing returns, is someone who becomes genuinely valuable to him beyond just emotional companionship. She doesn't need to manage him. She needs to be honest with him. There's an important distinction there. Changbin doesn't strike anyone who's watched him across years of content as someone who responds well to being handled carefully or spoken to with excessive softness. He responds to directness. A woman who can look at him and say clearly, without drama or manufactured delicacy, "You're overdoing it," or "That's not your best thinking right now," and then stand behind that assessment when he pushes back, is someone whose input he would actually take seriously. There is also a softer dimension that tends to get overlooked in conversations about Changbin because his bolder qualities are more immediately visible. He has shown, across various fan interactions and group content, a genuinely caring and attentive side that operates quietly beneath the louder surface. He notices when people are struggling. He checks in. He makes small gestures that reflect a level of emotional awareness that coexists with his high-energy exterior in a way that surprises people who only know the performance version of him. A partner who can receive that quieter side, who recognizes it without making it awkward or treating it as a contradiction of his bolder personality, is someone who sees him fully rather than partially. And someone who can reciprocate that care with genuine warmth of her own, without demanding that he perform his vulnerability on a schedule, would create a dynamic where both people are consistently getting what they actually need. His competitive nature also means he would thrive alongside a woman with genuine ambitions of her own. Not because he needs to compete with a partner, but because he is energized by people who are working towards something meaningful. A woman who is building something, a career, a craft, a vision, and who pursues it with the same kind of committed energy that Changbin brings to his own work, would be someone he genuinely respects. And for someone like Changbin, respect is not a small thing. It is foundational. The compatibility profile that emerges is a woman who is mentally strong, direct in her communication, grounded in her sense of self, and ambitious enough to command genuine respect, while also carrying enough warmth beneath her firmness to meet the quieter, more careful side of Changbin that most people don't see until they're already close to him. For someone who has built an entire creative identity around controlled power, the right partner is simply someone who brings that same quality to the relationship itself. And now we shift into the final three, starting with a member whose personality runs in an entirely different direction, one that's younger, brighter, and considerably more unpredictable in the best possible way. Number 3, I.N, a cheerful partner. Being the youngest member of any group carries a specific kind of weight, and how a person handles that weight tells you more about their character than almost anything else. Born young Hyunjin on February 8, 2001, in Seoul, South Korea, I.N joined Stray Kids as the maknae, the youngest, and debuted at 17 years old alongside members who were already several years his senior in both age and industry experience. That gap, in the early years of any K-pop group, is not insignificant. It shapes social dynamics, it influences how a member is perceived publicly, and it creates pressure to either shrink into the role of the youngest or find a way to establish a genuine identity that stands apart from that label. I.N did the latter. And the way he did it is worth paying attention to. Rather than overcompensating with a performance of maturity or trying to match the tones of older members, I.N leaned into his natural personality, which is genuinely bright, socially quick, and instinctively funny in a way that doesn't require setup. His humor isn't crafted for an audience. It emerges spontaneously in the middle of conversations, in the gaps between serious moments, in the kind of timing that can't really be taught. That quality has made him one of the most enjoyable members to watch in unscripted group content, because the moments he creates are consistently surprising and consistently real. What has become increasingly evident as I has moved out of his teenage years and into his 20s is that beneath the bright social exterior is someone with considerably more depth than the maknae energy label tends to allow for. He has spoken in various settings about taking his craft seriously, his vocal development, his performance quality, his role within the group dynamic. He is not someone who coasts on charm. He works, and he has said openly that the expectation he sets for himself is not calibrated to his age but to the standard the group collectively maintains. That combination, spontaneous lightness on the outside, genuine seriousness about the things that matter on the inside, is what defines I.N's personality with real accuracy. And it is exactly that combination that shapes who he is compatible with. The woman whose presence fits most naturally alongside I.N is someone who matches his brightness without manufacturing it. Cheerfulness, in this context, is not about being relentlessly positive or maintaining an upbeat performance through every situation. It's about someone whose baseline relationship with life is one of genuine engagement, someone who finds real things genuinely funny, who approaches new experiences with curiosity rather than resistance, and who brings an energy into shared moments that makes those moments feel larger than they would be individually. I.N is someone who enjoys the texture of everyday life. Not grand gestures, small, specific, spontaneous things. An unexpected situation that turns into a shared joke. A completely unplanned moment that somehow becomes a memory. A conversation that starts as nothing and ends up going somewhere neither person expected. A partner who is alive to that kind of experience, who doesn't need every moment to be constructed or significant to find value in it, would naturally fit the way I.N moves through the world. His social fluency also matters in this conversation. I.N is comfortable across a wide range of social contexts. He adapts, he reads rooms, he finds the right frequency for whoever he's with. A partner with similar social flexibility, who is comfortable being playful in one moment and thoughtful in the next without the transition feeling jarring, would keep pace with him naturally rather than creating friction. Humor, specifically, is a genuine compatibility factor for I.N rather than a peripheral one. He is the type of person who would be genuinely happy spending an evening laughing about nothing in particular, and who would find that kind of evening as valuable, in its own way, as a more conventionally significant one. A woman who understands that humor is a real form of intimacy, not just a social lubricant, and who can participate in that kind of exchange with genuine wit rather than polite laughter, would create a connection with I that feels easy in the way that only the right personality match actually does. At the same time, I.N has shown, particularly in quieter moments captured in group content and fan interactions, that he is capable of sincerity that lands with real weight. He doesn't perform emotional depth. When it comes naturally, and it's recognizable precisely because it contrasts with his more frequent lightness. A partner who can navigate that shift with him, who doesn't find the emotional moments jarring or try to pivot back to lightness before he's ready, is someone who has genuinely understood the fuller picture of who he is. His growth trajectory is also worth noting as a compatibility factor. I.N is still in his early 20s, and he has been public about viewing this period as one of active development, in his artistry, in his sense of self, in his understanding of what he values. A woman who is herself in active growth, who is curious about who she's becoming and interested in figuring that out alongside someone rather than waiting until everything is settled, would share a life orientation with I that creates genuine forward momentum for both people. There is something particularly compelling about the prospect of a partnership where shared experience is the currency, where the relationship is built not on grand romantic architecture but on an accumulating series of genuine, often unexpectedly funny, occasionally deeply sincere moments that stack into something meaningful over time. That is I.N's natural mode of connection. And the woman who fits is simply one who lives in that same mode, cheerful in the truest sense, curious by default, funny without trying too hard, and real in a way that makes every ordinary moment slightly better than it would have been alone. For the youngest member of a group that has operated at one of the highest levels in K-pop since their debut, that kind of partnership is not a small thing. It's the whole point. We're now in the final two, and the next member brings one of the sharpest, most quietly compelling personalities in the entire group. Number 2, Seungmin. A calm woman. Not every compelling personality announces itself loudly. Some of the most interesting people in any room are the ones you have to pay attention to in order to fully understand, and Seungmin is precisely that kind of person. Born Kim Seungmin on September 22, 2000, in Seoul, South Korea, Seungmin occupies a position within Stray Kids that is sometimes harder to define than the more immediately vivid personalities around him, and that difficulty in definition is itself the most accurate description of who he is. He doesn't reduce easily. He is not the loudest member, not the most visually dramatic, not the one whose personality registers as a single dominant frequency. What he is, consistently and across years of observable public behavior, is sharp. Quietly, precisely, consistently sharp. His humor is the most immediately accessible version of this. Seungmin's comedic sensibility is dry in a way that operates on a slight delay, the kind where the joke has already landed by the time you've registered that one was made. He doesn't telegraph punchlines. He doesn't perform amusement before delivering it. He states something, maintains eye contact, and moves on, leaving the room to catch up on its own schedule. It is a specific kind of wit that requires both intelligence and restraint to execute well, and Seungmin executes it with a consistency that suggests it is simply how his mind works rather than a style he has cultivated. Beyond the humor, Seungmin has developed a well-documented passion for baseball that goes considerably deeper than casual interest. He is openly identified as a lifelong fan of the Doosan Bears, the Korean professional baseball team, and his engagement with the sport reflects something genuine about how he invests in the things he cares about. He follows closely, he knows the details, he has opinions that he holds and defends. This pattern, of caring about something enough to understand it properly rather than just appreciating it from a distance, repeats across other areas of his life and tells you something important about how he approaches relationships. Seungmin is not someone who does anything halfway once he is committed to it. His vocal development within Stray Kids reflects this. He has grown substantially as a singer over the years of the group's activity, in ways that are clearly the product of deliberate and sustained work rather than natural talent alone. He sets a standard and then quietly, consistently meets it without requiring external acknowledgement for the effort. That character, disciplined, internally motivated, precise, and wry, creates a very specific compatibility picture. The woman who fits most naturally alongside Seungmin is someone who is calm. Not passive, not disengaged, but genuinely settled within herself in a way that produces a stable and steady presence. Seungmin's own energy is not chaotic, it is measured, controlled, and deliberate, and a partner who matches that register rather than disrupting it creates a dynamic where both people can actually think clearly in each other's presence. Communication is central to this. Seungmin is, by all available evidence, someone who enjoys actual conversation, the kind where both people are genuinely engaged with the substance of what's being said rather than performing engagement while waiting for their turn to speak. He has a quick and specific mind, and a partner who can follow that quickness, who can hold up her end of a real conversation without either struggling to keep pace or dominating it, is someone he would find genuinely stimulating company over time. This means the right woman for Seungmin is communicative in a substantive way. She has things to say that she has actually thought about. She has opinions that are hers, arrived at through her own reasoning, and she's willing to defend them if challenged while also being genuinely open to changing them if the argument warrants it. That combination, conviction without rigidity, is the conversational profile that would keep Seungmin interested well past the point where surface compatibility would run out. The calm that fits him is also the kind that can navigate depth. Seungmin does not appear to be someone who exclusively operates in light, surface-level social territory. He can go there, his humor is proof that he understands and enjoys casual exchange, but a partnership that stays permanently in the shallow end would, over time, feel insufficient to him. A woman who can move between a genuinely funny, low-stakes conversation and something more serious without making the transition feel like a gear shift is someone who mirrors his own range in a way that makes extended time together feel consistently worth having. His independence is also a relevant factor. Seungmin manages his inner life with a level of self-sufficiency that doesn't demand constant external input. He has his interests, his routines, his way of processing things, and he doesn't appear to require a partner who is perpetually available or perpetually engaged. A woman who is similarly self-contained, who has a full interior life of her own and doesn't need constant companionship to feel secure, would create a relationship where both people are choosing each other's company rather than depending on it. That distinction, for someone like Seungmin, is not subtle. It is the difference between a dynamic that feels free and one that feels obligatory. His maturity is worth naming explicitly because it shapes everything. Seungmin, for his age, demonstrates a level of self-awareness and emotional steadiness that is not universally common. He doesn't dramatize. He doesn't escalate. He processes, he responds, and he moves forward. A partner who brings that same maturity to conflict, to difficulty, and to the ordinary frictions of a shared life would find in Seungmin a completely reliable and genuinely present partner in return. The picture that assembles is a woman who is calm without being flat, communicative without being performative, intelligent enough to sustain real conversation, mature enough to handle what real conversation sometimes produces, and independent enough to make the choice to be with him every day feel like a choice rather than a default. For someone who notices everything and performs very little, that kind of partner is not just compatible. She is the only kind that actually makes sense. We have arrived at number 1, and this final compatibility profile carries a weight that the others have been building toward. Because Han is, in many ways, the most layered, most expressive, and most emotionally complex member of the entire group. Number 1, Han. Someone who truly understands. Every group has a member whose emotional frequency runs at a different voltage than everyone else around them. In Stray Kids, that member is Han, and the reason he lands at number 1 on this list is not because his compatibility needs are the most romantic or the most dramatic. It's because they are, genuinely, the most specific. Born Han Jae-sung on September 14, 2000, in Incheon, South Korea, Han spent several of his formative years in Malaysia before returning to Korea and eventually entering JYP Entertainment's trainee system. That period of living between cultures, belonging fully to neither while drawing from both, left a visible imprint on how he processes identity, emotion, and creative expression. He is someone who has spent a significant portion of his life navigating interior complexity in contexts where that complexity wasn't always easy to explain to the people around him. He channels that complexity directly into his work. As a core member of 3 Racha alongside Bang Chan and Changbin, Han is one of the primary lyrical voices of Stray Kids, and his lyrics are not generic. They are personal in a way that is immediately identifiable. He writes about anxiety, about self-doubt, about the gap between who you present to the world and who you actually are when the performance stops. He has spoken in interviews about how writing functions for him not as a creative exercise but as a psychological necessity, the way he makes sense of things that would otherwise stay unresolved inside him. That context is essential to understanding who Han actually is, because the version of him that appears in group content, spontaneous, loud, frequently hilarious, prone to non-sequiturs that somehow land perfectly, is completely real, but it is not the complete picture. Han is one of the most emotionally multidimensional people in Stray Kids. The same person who will derail a serious interview with an absurdist observation is also the person who writes with genuine emotional precision about what it feels like to lose confidence in yourself at 3 in the morning. Both are authentic. Neither cancels the other out. That duality is the central fact of Han's personality, and it is the most important factor in his compatibility. A woman who only knows how to be present for the loud, energetic, comedic version of Han would eventually find herself blindsided by the other version, the one that surfaces in quiet moments, in late nights after the adrenaline of performance has worn off, in the spaces between public life where the real processing happens. Conversely, a woman who only relates to the more introspective, emotionally complex Han would miss the fact that his spontaneity and humor are not shields or deflections. They are equally genuine expressions of who he is. The woman who fits Han is someone who can hold both, without finding the shift between them confusing, without treating one version as more real or more valuable than the other, and without requiring him to stay in either mode longer than he naturally does. That capacity, to be a present and comfortable companion across the full emotional range of another person, is rarer than it sounds, and for Han it is non-negotiable. Han has spoken directly about his need for connection that goes beyond surface level. He is not someone who is satisfied with interactions that stay permanently in comfortable, unchallenging territory. He is drawn to people who are willing to go somewhere real in conversation, to say something honest, to admit something difficult, to engage with the parts of experience that are harder to articulate. A partner who is willing to be genuinely open with him, who trusts him enough to bring the unresolved parts of herself into the relationship rather than only the polished ones, is someone Han would invest in with everything he has. His anxiety, which he has addressed publicly and with notable honesty across several points in his career, is also a factor that shapes his compatibility in a direct way. Han has described periods where self-doubt was persistent and difficult to manage, where the internal narrative ran harder and faster than the external evidence warranted. A partner who understands anxiety not as a character flaw but as a feature of how certain kinds of minds process the world, who can offer steadiness without minimizing the experience, who can be a grounding presence without making him feel pathologized for what he feels, is someone whose value in his life would be genuinely immeasurable. That grounding quality is perhaps the single most important thing the right woman brings to Han's life. Not because he needs to be managed, he doesn't, but because he is someone who generates an enormous amount of internal weather, and a partner who can be consistently present through that weather without being destabilized by it gives him something he genuinely cannot produce for himself, a place where the volume inside his head turns down naturally, simply because she is there. His creativity also creates a specific partnership opportunity. Han is someone for whom creative exchange is a form of intimacy. He responds to ideas, to music, to the kind of conversation where one thought leads unexpectedly to another and both people end up somewhere neither of them anticipated. A woman who engages with the world creatively, who has things she is making, or thinking about, or figuring out, is someone Han can connect with on the level where he actually lives. A relationship that includes that kind of exchange is one he would find consistently generative rather than static. And then there is the simpler, more human dimension. Han is someone who loves deeply and who expresses that love in ways that are specific and attentive. He pays attention to the people he cares about. He remembers what matters to them. He shows up in the particular rather than the general. A woman who receives that quality of attention with genuine appreciation, and who reflects it back to him with equal specificity, would create in Han a sense of being truly known rather than simply liked. That is the whole thing, for someone like Han. Not admiration. Not attraction. Not even affection in its broadest form. Being truly known by someone who has seen both the laughter and the 3 a.m. silence, and who stays, consistently and without condition, across all of it. For a man who has spent his career writing about the experience of being seen and sometimes falling short of it, the right woman is simply the one who reads between the lines and chooses to stay anyway. And that brings us to the end of this list: 8 members, 8 distinct personalities, 8 completely different answers to the same fundamental question. What's worth remembering as you process all of this is that personality compatibility is not a formula. It doesn't reduce to a checklist of qualities, and it certainly doesn't follow the logic of what looks good on paper. Bang Chan needs someone who understands absence. Lee No needs someone who can hold their ground. Hyunjin needs someone who speaks the language of feeling. Felix needs someone whose warmth is structural. Changbin needs someone whose firmness matches his own. I.N needs someone who finds genuine joy in the ordinary. Seungmin needs someone who can sustain a real conversation. And Han needs someone who stays for the version of him that never makes it on camera. These are not arbitrary preferences. They emerge directly from who these 8 people actually are, built through years of training, performing, growing up in public, and figuring out their identities in one of the most demanding industries on the planet. Of course, the only opinions that actually matter here belong to the members themselves. They know things about what they need that no amount of public observation can fully access, and that's exactly as it should be. But that's what makes this conversation worth having. Not because we have the answers, but because thinking carefully about who someone is, what they need, what they give, what makes them feel genuinely understood, is how we get better at seeing people at all. So here's the question we'll leave you with. Looking at this list honestly, which member do you think has the most specific compatibility needs? And do you think the ranking got it right? Drop your answer in the comments. And if this kind of personality breakdown is something you want to see more of, you know what to do.